Are learning the Justice Department issued a wave of firings late last week and even into this weekend. More than 20 employees who worked on former special counsel Jack Smith's cases against President Trump, they've been let go, told to walk. Well, the staffers cut were identified by a group established by President Trump's Attorney General, Pam Bondi. So CBS News Justice reporter Jake Rosen watching this one closely, live from Washington. So, Jake, critics will say that these firings are retribution for Jack Smith's case against the president. What's the word from the Trump administration about why?
Well, there really has been no obvious confirmation of a lot of this stuff, Reed, but when speaking with sources Friday into Saturday, and we did some reporting earlier in the week on people who had been let go, it's clear that this weaponization working group, which you just alluded to, which is doing everything from investigating so-called bias into Catholics in America to working on COVID issues, in addition to obviously looking into people who had investigated President Trump, not just people at the top of city leadership, like think about New York City and New York State and the legal problems that the president faces and faced there, but it's also people who worked on these high-profile investigations. And a source told CBS News that of the people that worked for Jack Smith, 35 of them have been let go so far. There's a probability that over a dozen more are let go. This is people range from paralegals, not necessarily just attorneys, right? Paralegals, people who worked on financial parts of the investigation, all the way to, obviously, as we know and have reported on this for months now, of people who were actually the January 6th federal prosecutors, and that kind of any attachment to these cases resulted in kind of a stain on their mark and thus being let go. We've seen this happen in North Carolina, Florida, and elsewhere, in which people who have just been investigating people and suspects in January 6th or working on that classified documents case down in Florida have been let go. Certainly more to come, and Pam Bondi has made no secret of what she is willing to do. It was saying that she would be willing to go in and kind of work as the president's hatchet man to carve out what she sees as people who took illegal steps during these investigations, and she has not necessarily differentiated herself yet between people who were just doing what they were asked to do by former DOJ leadership.
Well, and top officials at the FBI and the Justice Department are kind of in a dispute about the disclosure of the information specifically in the Jeffrey Epstein case. You're watching that one closely. What do you know?
Yeah, we have, and we know that after the release of this two-page memo, which is at the center of so much of this dispute a week ago today, on Wednesday there was a high-profile meeting at the White House, which included FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino, in addition to others who are involved in this, including Attorney General Pam Bondi. We know that as a result of this meeting, which got very aggressive in terms of people voicing their frustrations with how this was released, the frustrations that Trump voters have voiced online, not just aimed at the president or Bongino, but generally speaking out, calling for, we saw today, Laura Loomer, a far-right conspiracy theorist, calling for a special counsel investigation into the handling of these documents. This isn't going away anytime soon. We know Bongino did not show up for work on Friday, and as the president had tried to calm down over the weekend via True Social, telling people to let Pam Bondi and Patel and Bongino do their jobs, the base has been frustrated, and there have been people essentially ratioing President Trump on True Social, saying that they're frustrated with the lack of transparency that they were promised and for which they voted for back in November, for releasing things along these lines that are of such a prominent social influence really in MAGA culture of who really is at the bottom of these Epstein things, and the conspiracy theory it's indicative of, Reed, of who's actually involved in this kind of deep state in America.
Well, and it was only amplified with Elon Musk's, Trump's former DOJ official, echoing a lot of things about the Epstein files. All right, Jake, nice to talk to you today. Have a good Monday. We'll see you back here very soon, I'm sure. Jumping